At my daughter's wedding in Charleston, she stood under white flowers, smiled at 180 guests, and thanked her stepfather for raising her after my real father chose money over family. I sat in the back row, silent, while people turned to stare at me like I was a stranger who had walked in off the street. Then my phone rang, and my bank manager said the joint wedding account had just been emptied. My name is Martin Hale. I'm 58 years old and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. For most of my life, I believed a man showed love by staying steady. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. I owned a commercial glass repair company in Charleston, the kind of business people only noticed when something shattered. Storefronts after storms, office windows after break-ins, restaurant doors that cracked at the worst possible time. My phone had rung at midnight more times than I could count, and I had always answered. That was how I raised my daughter Emily too. I answered. When she needed braces, I paid. When she needed tuition, I paid. When she called crying because her car broke down outside Columbia, I sent a tow truck before she finished explaining. I did not keep score because fathers are not supposed to keep score. But sitting there at that wedding, listening to her thank Raymond Carter like he had been the only man who ever stood beside her, I felt something inside me go quiet. Raymond sat at the family table beside my ex-wife, Denise, wearing a silver tie and the satisfied look of a man accepting applause he had not earned. Denise dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but I knew her well enough to know those tears were for the room. She had always known when people were watching. Emily looked beautiful. That made it worse. She was in a lace dress with her hair pinned back, glowing under the soft lights of the waterfront venue. For 1 second, I did not see the woman humiliating me. I saw the little girl who used to run across my workshop with safety goggles too big for her face, asking if she could help Daddy fix the world. Then her voice came through the microphone again. "Raymond," she said, smiling at him, "you taught me what a real father looks like." A few guests clapped softly. Someone near me whispered, "Poor thing." I kept my hands folded in my lap. I did not stand. I did not argue. I did not embarrass my daughter on her wedding day, even after she had embarrassed me. My phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but I saw the name on the screen. Diane Mercer. Diane was my bank manager. She did not call during weddings. She did not call after hours unless something was wrong. I stepped out through the side doors into the warm Charleston evening. Behind me, music and applause floated through the glass. Ahead of me, the harbor was dark and still. "Martin," Diane said, her voice tight, "I'm sorry to bother you tonight, but I need to confirm something immediately. Did you authorize a full transfer out of the wedding account?" I looked back through the window. Emily was laughing now, her hand resting on Caleb's arm. "What transfer?" I asked. There was a pause. "The entire balance," Diane said. "It was moved this afternoon. The authorization came through with documents attached." My mouth went dry. "That account required 2 approvals," I said. "I know," she answered. "That's why I'm calling you." For the first time that night, I felt something colder than hurt. I felt the shape of a bigger lie forming around me. I did not leave the wedding right away. I stood outside that venue with Diane's words still pressing against my ear, watching my daughter's reception move behind the windows like a scene from somebody else's life. People were smiling, glasses were being raised. Raymond was leaning back in his chair like a proud father, while Denise sat beside him with that soft, wounded face she used whenever she wanted sympathy. I told Diane I would call her back in 10 minutes. Then I walked to the far end of the patio where the music was quieter. I needed air. I needed time to think. Most of all, I needed to keep myself from walking back inside and asking questions that would destroy the night before I understood the truth. That had always been my problem, according to Denise. I waited. I measured my words. I believed facts mattered more than volume. During our divorce, she called that coldness. I called it survival. Emily was 9 when Denise and I split. Back then, my business was still young. I worked long days because I was trying to build something stable enough to keep my daughter secure. Denise used those hours against me. If I missed a school pickup because a hotel lobby window had shattered during a storm, she told Emily I had chosen work. If I came late to a recital with glass dust still on my boots, Denise told her I had only shown up because she reminded me. I never wanted Emily caught between us. So I stayed quiet more often than I should have. I paid what the court ordered, then more. I paid for summer camps, school trips, dance lessons, the laptop Denise said Emily needed, and the braces Denise said could not wait. When Emily got into college, I paid the difference after scholarships. When she needed rent help during her first job in Atlanta, I wired the deposit before she even asked twice. But Denise had a gift for rewriting a thing while it was happening. If I sent money, she said she had handled it. If I solved a problem, she said Raymond had stepped up. If I showed up, she said I was trying to look good. If I stayed back, she said I did not care. Raymond entered Emily's life when she was 13. He was polished in a way that impressed people quickly. Good handshake, smooth voice, expensive watch. He sold real estate investments and always talked like he knew where money was going before everyone else did. Emily liked him at first because he was easy. He said yes to things. He bought gifts. He promised trips. I was the father who asked about grades, oil changes, and whether she was saving money. I tried not to compete with him. I told myself a child could have more than one adult who cared. If Raymond treated Emily well, I would not punish her for loving him too. But there were moments that stayed with me. At Emily's high school graduation, Denise told me Raymond had paid for the party. I knew that was not true because the charge had come from my card. At Emily's college move-in, Denise told me not to mention tuition because it would make Emily feel guilty. At the time, I agreed. I thought I was protecting my daughter from adult tension. Now, standing outside her wedding, I wondered if I had protected the wrong lie. 5 days before the ceremony, I had been in my office on Meeting Street, reviewing a storefront repair estimate, when Emily called. Her voice sounded careful, almost formal. "Dad," she said, "I just want this week to be peaceful." I leaned back in my chair. So do I. Mom thinks it would be better if Raymond handles most of the family stuff at the wedding. That sentence landed quietly, but it landed hard. What kind of family stuff? I asked. The greeting line, some pictures, maybe the toast order. Nothing major. Nothing major. That was how people introduced a wound when they wanted you to pretend it did not bleed. I told her I understood. I told her the day was about her and Caleb. I even meant it. But after we hung up, I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the framed photo on my desk of Emily at 11 years old, holding a tiny hammer in my workshop and grinning like she had built the whole city herself. I had spent 20 years staying steady, but somehow, while I was paying bills and keeping peace, someone had been teaching my daughter to see me as a stranger. The week leading up to the wedding felt less like preparing for my daughter's happiest day, and more like being quietly removed from it, one piece at a time. 3 days before the ceremony, the wedding coordinator emailed everyone the final schedule. My name appeared only twice, once as a guest arriving at 3 o'clock and once during dinner seating. There was no father-daughter dance, no family welcome, no mention of me giving a toast. At first, I assumed it had to be a mistake. I called Emily that evening. "Hey, sweetheart," I said as calmly as I could. I was looking over the schedule. There was a brief silence. "I figured you might. I noticed the father-daughter dance isn't listed." She sighed. "We decided to skip it." "We?" "Caleb and I." I knew she wasn't telling me the whole truth, but I didn't push. "If that's what you want, it is." She sounded relieved that I hadn't argued. After we hung up, I stared out the office window at the Charleston skyline. Every father imagines dancing with his daughter at her wedding at least once. I had imagined it since she was a little girl standing on my shoes in the kitchen while we danced to old songs on the radio. Apparently, I had been the only one holding on to that memory. The next disappointment came the day before the wedding. I arrived at the rehearsal dinner about 15 minutes early. It was being held at a private dining room overlooking the marina. Staff members hurried around placing candles and adjusting flower arrangements. One of the coordinators handed me my place card. Table 7. I looked toward the front of the room. Emily and Caleb were seated at the head table with Denise, Raymond, and both sets of grandparents. Olivia was beside Emily as maid of honor. Table 7 sat near the back, beside distant relatives I barely knew. I walked over to the coordinator. "I think there's been a mistake." She checked her clipboard. "No, sir. This is exactly how the family requested it." The family, not my family. Before I could say another word, Denise appeared beside me wearing a warm smile that never reached her eyes. "Martin," she said softly, Please don't make this awkward. I'm asking about my seat. It's only one dinner. I'm her father. She folded her arms. And tonight we're trying to avoid unnecessary tension. I've created tension? Please, she whispered. Don't make Emily's wedding about yourself. There it was, the sentence Denise had used for years whenever I questioned anything. I looked at her for several seconds before answering. I haven't raised my voice. No, she replied, but I know you. She walked away before I could respond. I took my seat at table 7. Nobody there had done anything wrong. They chatted about the weather, local restaurants, and vacation plans. I smiled politely whenever someone included me in the conversation, but my attention stayed fixed on the head table. Emily laughed at something Raymond said. He leaned over and straightened the collar of her jacket the same way a father might. Nobody seemed to notice except me. Dinner eventually gave way to speeches. Caleb stood first. He thanked both families for supporting them and spoke warmly about starting a future together. Then Raymond stood. He lifted his glass toward Emily. When Denise and I married, he began, Emily was still a teenager trying to figure out life. He paused dramatically. I promised myself that no matter what happened, I'd always be there to guide her. The room applauded. I watched her grow into the incredible woman she is today. More applause. I couldn't be prouder to call her my daughter. Every word landed heavier than the last. I wasn't angry that Raymond loved Emily. I was angry because he was accepting credit for a life he hadn't built. I looked toward Emily. She smiled. She raised her own glass toward him. She didn't correct him. She didn't mention me. She didn't even glance in my direction. For the first time all week, I stopped telling myself these were simple wedding decisions. This was something much deeper. Someone had spent years rewriting my place in my daughter's life, and judging by the smiles around that room, almost everyone believed the new version. The rehearsal dinner ended just after 9. Guests lingered around the marina, taking pictures against the water while the city lights reflected across the harbor. I stayed only long enough to congratulate Caleb one more time before quietly walking toward the parking lot. I had almost reached my truck when I heard someone call my name. Martin. I turned and saw Olivia Bennett jogging toward me in her navy blue bridesmaid dress. Emily's cousin had always been thoughtful, even as a little girl. She looked nervous now, constantly glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one had followed her. Can we talk for a minute? She asked. Of course. She took a deep breath before speaking. I'm sorry about tonight. I forced a small smile. You don't have anything to apologize for. I do because I've watched this happen for years. Her words immediately caught my attention. What do you mean? Olivia hesitated, clearly choosing her next sentence carefully. Emily doesn't know the truth about you. I felt my chest tighten. What truth? She honestly believes you stopped caring after the divorce. I looked down at the pavement. I was afraid of that. No, Olivia said quietly. I don't think you understand. She believes you barely paid child support. She thinks Raymond helped with college because you wouldn't. She thinks you skipped birthdays because you were too busy making money. Each sentence felt like another weight settling on my shoulders. Who told her that? Olivia didn't answer immediately. She didn't have to. Denise, I said. Olivia slowly nodded. And Raymond never corrected any of it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The warm evening breeze carried music from inside the restaurant, but it sounded distant now. I tried talking to Emily a few times, Olivia continued. She wouldn't listen. Every time I questioned something, your ex-aunt would say I didn't know the whole story. I never wanted Emily caught between her parents. I know. I thought staying quiet would make things easier for her. Olivia looked at me with genuine sadness. Instead, your silence became proof against you. Those words hurt because they were probably true. I had spent nearly 20 years believing that actions spoke louder than words. I had never imagined someone could erase those actions simply by telling a different story often enough. Olivia reached into her purse. I shouldn't be doing this yet. She held up her phone. I heard something yesterday. She tapped the screen but didn't hand it to me. I wasn't trying to spy. I walked into the bridal suite while Denise and Emily were talking. What were they saying? Olivia swallowed. Denise was practicing tomorrow's speech with Emily. I frowned. The thank you speech? She nodded. I heard Denise say, "Make sure everyone knows Raymond raised you. People need to understand who your real family is now." A cold feeling settled over me. Emily agreed? She didn't argue. That answer hurt more than I expected. I don't think Emily was trying to be cruel, Olivia added quickly. I think she believes every word. I leaned against my truck. I kept every receipt, I said quietly. Olivia looked confused. What? I kept every tuition payment, every child support record, every medical bill, every email, every transfer. She stared at me. Why? Because my accountant always told me to keep financial records. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then something occurred to me. The wedding account. Olivia tilted her head. What about it? I've had a strange feeling all week. I couldn't explain it, but something about Denise's confidence bothered me. She had acted as though money was never an issue. Vendors were being paid without questions. Raymond spoke as if he controlled everything. Yet I had funded almost every major expense. Now Diane's unexpected phone call echoed in my mind. The account had been emptied, authorized with documents that should never have existed. For the first time, those two problems no longer felt separate. They felt connected. I looked back toward the restaurant where my daughter was celebrating what should have been the happiest weekend of her life. Somewhere inside that building, someone had stolen far more than money. They had stolen 20 years of truth. I barely slept that night. After leaving the rehearsal dinner, I drove home instead of calling anyone else. My house overlooked a quiet stretch of marsh outside downtown Charleston, and normally the silence settled my mind. That night, it only gave my thoughts more room to grow. I replayed Diane's words over and over. The entire balance was transferred this afternoon. That account had been created for one purpose: paying wedding expenses. Months earlier, Emily and I had opened it together so vendors could be paid from a single place. We had both signed the paperwork, but the agreement required approval from both account holders for a transfer of that size. Someone had found a way around that. At 7:30 the next morning, before I returned to the wedding venue, I met Diane Mercer at the downtown branch of the bank. She was already waiting in a conference room with a folder spread across the table. "I wish this meeting were under better circumstances," she said as I sat down. "So do I." She slid several printed documents toward me. The transfer happened yesterday at 2:17 p.m. I studied the paperwork. Every dollar in the account had been wired to a limited liability company I had never heard of. Harbor Crest Holdings, LLC. "Who owns this?" I asked. "We're still confirming that." I looked closer at the authorization page. My signature appeared near the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. At first glance, it looked convincing. The shape was similar. The initials were correct. But the pressure, the slant, even the way the last letter curved, it wasn't how I signed legal documents. "This is forged." "I believe so," Diane replied. "And Emily never approved this." "No." "Then how did it happen?" Diane folded her hands. "That's what concerns me." She explained that electronic copies of identification and banking documents had been uploaded with the transfer request, documents that should have remained private. Someone had somehow obtained copies of paperwork from the original account file. I leaned back slowly. "Can the transfer be stopped?" She shook her head. "Not immediately. The funds already cleared." "What happens now?" "We've opened an internal fraud investigation." I nodded. "And I strongly recommend you speak with your attorney before confronting anyone." I agreed. The last thing I wanted was an emotional argument without facts. As I stood to leave, Diane stopped me. "Martin," I turned. "I've managed your business accounts for almost 15 years. I know. I've never seen you move money carelessly. I don't." She gave me a sympathetic look. That's why I knew something was wrong. For the first time since yesterday, I felt grateful someone had trusted my character enough to question what happened. An hour later, I sat across from attorney Grant Ellis. Grant had represented me during my divorce nearly 20 years earlier. His office looked exactly the same as I remembered: dark shelves lined with legal books, framed degrees, and a window overlooking King Street. After reviewing the bank documents, he remained silent for nearly a minute. Finally, he asked one question. Do you know anyone connected to Harbor Crest Holdings? No. He typed something into his computer. A few moments later, he turned the monitor toward me. A public business registration filled the screen. Registered manager, Raymond Carter. Neither of us spoke. Grant broke the silence first. That's unfortunate. I stared at the name. Raymond. The same man who had stood at the rehearsal dinner talking about raising my daughter. The same man Emily planned to honor at the reception. The same man connected to the company that had just received every dollar from the wedding account. Grant closed the file. At this point, we don't accuse anyone publicly. I wasn't planning to. We document everything. I always do. We report the fraud. Absolutely. And we let evidence lead us. I nodded. That had always been my way. No shouting. No revenge. Just facts. Before leaving, Grant opened an old storage box from a filing cabinet. I want to check something from your divorce. He pulled out documents almost 2 decades old, financial agreements, custody schedules, support records. As he flipped through them, his expression changed. This may be more important than the bank transfer. What is it? Grant looked directly at me. I think your divorce records prove Denise hid years of financial support from Emily. The wedding was only hours away, but suddenly it wasn't the only truth waiting to come out. I looked at Grant, trying not to jump to conclusions. What did you find? He turned one of the old files toward me. It was the final divorce agreement, followed by several court filings and correspondence between our attorneys from years earlier. Do you remember this provision? He asked. I scanned the page. It required that all major financial support beyond child support, including college tuition, medical expenses, and extraordinary educational costs, be documented and shared between both parents. I remember signing it, I said. Grant nodded. You followed it. And Denise? He pulled another folder from the box. These are copies of the notices your attorney sent over the years. Every tuition payment, every medical reimbursement, every large transfer you made for Emily. He spread the papers across the conference table. There are certified mail receipts, email confirmations, bank transfer records, signed acknowledgments from Denise's former attorney. Grant tapped one page with his finger. Legally, Denise knew exactly where the money came from. I let out a slow breath. So she couldn't honestly tell Emily she paid for those things herself. No. And she couldn't claim I refused to help. Not if these records are accurate. They were accurate. I had always believed paperwork was boring until the day someone tried to rewrite history. Grant continued sorting through the files. There may not be a legal claim for every lie she told over the years. I understand. But these documents destroy the narrative if it ever reaches mediation or court. That mattered. Not because I wanted to embarrass Denise. Because I wanted the truth to exist somewhere other than inside my own memory. When I left Grant's office, my phone vibrated. It was Olivia. Can you talk? Yes. I'm sending you something. A few seconds later, several screenshots appeared. They were from a group text between Denise, Emily, and Raymond. My stomach tightened as I read them. Denise, remember to thank Raymond first. People need to understand who has always been there. Raymond, don't worry about Martin. He'll survive one uncomfortable evening. Emily, I don't want drama. Denise, there won't be any if you stick to what we discussed. Another screenshot showed part of the speech, the same words Emily had spoken at the reception. My real father chose money over family. I closed my eyes for a moment. Emily hadn't invented those lines. She had rehearsed them. Olivia called immediately after sending the messages. I'm sorry, she said softly. You didn't create this. I know, but I watched it happen. How did you get these? Denise left her phone on the kitchen counter while everyone was getting ready yesterday. I wasn't looking for anything. A message popped up and, after everything I'd seen over the years, I took pictures. You may have just helped uncover the truth. I just couldn't keep watching you get blamed. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I drove back to my office. For years, I had kept every important financial record in fireproof filing cabinets. Some people joked that I treated receipts like family photographs. That habit suddenly became the strongest ally I had. I spent the next several hours gathering everything connected to Emily. Tuition payments from her university, apartment security deposits, monthly rent assistance during her first year after graduation, medical bills after she broke her wrist in college, car repair invoices, wedding venue payments, catering deposits, florist invoices, photography contracts. Every major expense had one thing in common. The money had come from me, not Denise, not Raymond, me. By late afternoon, the conference table in my office was covered with neatly organized folders. There was no guessing anymore. There were dates, amounts, signatures, canceled checks, electronic confirmations, facts. Grant arrived just before 5. He looked over the organized files and gave a slow nod. This is exactly what we need. I don't want revenge, I told him. I know. I don't want to ruin Emily's marriage. I know. I just want the lies to stop. Grant closed one folder. Then we proceed carefully. Together we filed the fraud report with the bank and prepared a formal legal demand regarding the missing wedding funds. Before leaving, I made one final decision. I would not interrupt the reception. I would not stand up in front of guests and expose anyone. Emily deserved to finish her wedding day without a public scene. If the truth was as strong as these documents suggested, it could wait one more night. But it would not wait forever. The morning after the wedding, Denise hosted a farewell brunch at the same waterfront venue. Most of the out-of-town guests were there, along with close family and the wedding vendors who had stayed for the event. I arrived on time, carrying nothing but a slim leather folder. I wasn't there to argue. I was there because Grant had advised me that if accusations were going to be made publicly, the facts needed to be presented calmly and completely. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. People laughed about the reception, shared photos from the night before, and congratulated Emily and Caleb. Then the wedding planner approached Denise with a worried expression. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, though everyone nearby could hear. "Several balances are still outstanding. Our accounting department says yesterday's payment never arrived." Denise immediately turned toward me. I knew this would happen. The room grew quiet. She folded her arms. "Martin, if you were upset about the wedding, you should have talked to us instead of refusing to pay the vendors." Several guests looked at me with confusion. Emily's face fell. "Dad, is that true?" I stood slowly. "No." Denise shook her head dramatically. "Then explain why the money disappeared." "I will." I opened the leather folder and placed a few documents on the table. The money did disappear. I looked directly at Raymond. But it didn't disappear because I refused to pay. Grant, who had quietly arrived a few minutes earlier, stepped beside me without saying a word. I continued. "Yesterday afternoon, every dollar was transferred from the wedding account without my authorization." Raymond's expression changed for the first time all weekend. I slid another page across the table. "The bank has confirmed the transfer is under fraud investigation." Then I placed the business registration beside it. The money was transferred to Harbor Crest Holdings, LLC. Caleb looked down at the document. "Who's Harbor Crest?" I answered before anyone else could. "The registered manager is Raymond Carter." The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Raymond finally spoke. "That doesn't prove I took anything." "No," I replied evenly. "That's why I haven't accused you. I've reported the facts, and the investigation will determine the rest." Before Denise could interrupt, I laid out another stack of records. "Since we're discussing money, there's something Emily deserves to see. Bank transfers, college tuition receipts, apartment deposits, medical bills, wedding invoices. Each payment listed my name. Each payment had a date. Each payment had proof." Emily stared at the papers without saying a word. For the first time since the wedding began, the story she had believed for years was no longer the only story in the room. The weeks that followed were difficult, but they finally brought the truth into the open. The bank's fraud investigation confirmed that the transfer had been made using forged authorization documents. Law enforcement took over the financial investigation, and Raymond became the focus of the case because of his connection to Harbor Crest Holdings, LLC. Denise was required to participate in mediation after the evidence showed she had knowingly hidden years of my financial support from Emily, while allowing false claims about me to continue. No courtroom speech changed everything overnight. Real life rarely works that way. Instead, the truth came out one document at a time. Emily read every receipt, Every tuition payment, every medical bill, every email, and every court record. By the time she finished, the story she had believed since childhood had completely fallen apart. About 6 weeks later, she came to my office alone. She stood in the doorway for several seconds before speaking. "Dad, I'm sorry." There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't ask for instant forgiveness. "I believed things that weren't true," she said quietly, "and I hurt you in front of everyone." I nodded. "I know. I don't expect you to forget." "I won't," I answered honestly. "But that doesn't mean we can't start over." 3 months after the wedding, we met for coffee overlooking Charleston Harbor. We talked about ordinary things for the first time in years. The past wasn't erased, but for the first time it wasn't built on lies. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, they come from the people we love most. But this story also reminds us that the truth has a way of finding its place, even after years of silence. Trust can be broken in a moment, but rebuilding it begins with honesty. I'd love to hear what you think. If you were in Martin's position, would you have forgiven your daughter? Or would the damage have been too great to repair? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, please leave a like. It really helps the channel reach more people who enjoy emotional family drama and justice stories like this. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more powerful family revenge stories filled with unforgettable twists, hidden truths, and emotional endings. Until next time, never let someone else's version of your story become the only one that's remembered.